Gender neutral is a term that you will become increasingly familiar with over the next few years. And it's part of the ideology that men and women are exactly the same. The thought that everything you see, from sexuality to occupation choice, is created by stereotypes, by the things that kids watch on TV, the clothes they wear, the toys they play with, and none of it is related to anything biological. Now let me blow your mind for a hot minute. And if you're offended by what I say next, do us all a favour and kindly fuck off. Men and women are not the same. They're just not. These two genders are different physically and psychologically, from muscle size to bone structure, from hormones to hair growth. They're just different. And perhaps most shockingly of all, that's okay. It's okay to be different. There's nothing fucking wrong with that. Thankfully, in our great country, we have dodged these conversations like the fucking plague for some time. Well, until this week, that is. Every news provider in the country reported that a Victorian council had determined that books and toys like Thomas the Tank Engine, Winnie the Pooh, Bratz dolls, Barbie dolls, and even fucking Noddy are potentially harmful to children and push these evil gender stereotypes. They even toyed with the idea that they should stop referring to boys and girls as boys and girls.
Popular children's books could be banned in Victorian public schools and libraries if they don't meet a so-called gender test. Some local councils are carrying out an audit and urging a ban on the terms boy and girl to teach kids as young as 3 to have gender equitable relationships. Under the new guidelines, children's favourites, including Thomas the Tank Engine, Noddy and Winnie the Pooh, could all be taken off the shelf.
Now you may be asking, what do I mean by gender stereotyping? And thankfully, the good people at Butterfield, as always, have come through with the goods and produced amazing content perfectly describing what I'm trying to get across.
Welcome, welcome. Here are your new company laptops.
Okay, so the girl's laptop, hang on, I'm doing it again. The person who I assume is female, her laptop is pink and it's got all lovely little photos of tiaras and little horses and all those little nice things. And the human being, who I presume is a male because of his, cock and stuff, he's got little race cars and dinosaurs and all that boy stuff. Thus proving once and for all that the reason that women like pink things is because they are forced to from a young age. What the fuck, BuzzFeed?
David, you can't wear that. It's a girl color.
A girl's colour. It's hardly a girl's colour. It is not 1950. Believe it or not, even I own pink/salmon clothes. Although in saying that, I have a beard, I could grow a clitoris and still be a man. Maybe.
Oh, here. Pick that one or that one. Yeah. That's cute, see? Yeah.
That's a very strange thing to want to aspire to be as a woman. If you're a young girl and you want to grow up to be a stud, all the power to you, champ.
Okay. I think that'll be it.
That's all.
Mm-hmm. Boys will be boys.
Yes, boys will be boys. Now this is something that does occur quite regularly. Now I definitely don't think it should be used as an excuse for boys to be fuckwits. This is what young boys do. They wrestle. They have little arguments, little fights. And it happens all across the animal kingdom too. Perhaps not across all species, but definitely the majority. Do you know who else has little fights, little arguments? Young girls. Anyone who has daughters would know that they do the exact same fucking thing. It's just what kids do. It's not boys being boys, it's kids being kids. Ah, yes. But when they grow up, that's when the problem skyrockets. You see, all these young men running around with testosterone pumping through their veins, all they want to do is fight and carry on and jostle for position in social circles. But the thing is, wolves do the same thing. They jostle for position in their hierarchy within their pack. They display dominance over weaker wolves to become king of the wolves. And I guess male men, not male men, but male men, would do the exact same thing. Perhaps they're being dickheads, or perhaps it's something left over from evolution. The mainstream media ran with the story about the Victorian councils pushing for all these things to happen with libraries and school books and toys to be removed. Now that was completely disingenuous. That wasn't the entire story. In fact, these were just some slight points that were made that perhaps the schooling system could adopt but doesn't necessarily have to, and it's definitely not law. But the media did what the media does and finds a story that is clickbaity enough so people listen. Oh, Isaac, you clickbaited me. I thought this was a story about that. Yeah, fair enough. But you're halfway through the fucking video, you may as well watch the rest. The fallacies that were put forward by the mainstream media were actually quite interesting to see, as they were disproven or debunked, for all you conspiracy theorists out there, by an SBS article. Now, I read the SBS article. I was actually enjoying listening to another side that contradicted everything that the mainstream said, until I read this line. When talking about Thomas the Tank Engine, several male politicians defended Thomas the Tank Engine and Winnie the Pooh. Now, it's interesting to see that SBS still managed to put their agenda through there by suggesting that, of course, men can't have a valid opinion because of their sexual organs. We know how that affects the brain. Although, in saying that, I thought men and women were exactly the same. Come on, SBS, make up your mind. The actual study, which was released a few years ago, basically said that we should push for both genders to have the same opportunities, and I agree with that. They should definitely have the same opportunities. I think any logical human being would agree with that as well. But what worries me, and what should worry you, is the domino effect that if this were to be installed into the schooling system in Victoria or Australia, the effect that it would have on everybody else. Now, you may believe that this would never happen in our country, but with the politically correct lunatics who seem to be running the show being echoed by mainstream media, it seems it could be a few months to a year away from really taking a foothold in Australia. Because if you remove the idea of two genders, then you have to replace it with what? More genders? No, that could never happen, Isaac. How could there be more than two genders? Well, in fact, I will agree that intersex is perhaps a third gender. 1.7% of Australian babies born every year are considered intersex. But would you change the entire schooling system to fit the lives of 1.7% of children born every year? In the same vein that you wouldn't change the schooling system to represent 3% of children who are born every year with birth defects. A small minority can't affect such a large majority. We could never teach kids in PE class that all humans have 2 hands and 2 feet, except for some people who have 2 hands and 1 foot. Okay, so we've got 3 genders. That seems okay. We can live with 3, male, female, and everybody else. If only it were that simple. You see, there are many, many more than just 2 genders. In fact, according to popular social media site and home of very logical thinking people, Tumblr, there are currently 112. That's right, Australia, 112. In saying that, in Australia there are only 33 genders recognised, and they include woman, man, trans woman, FTM, transsexual, cisgender, cis-female, gender non-conforming, non-gender, non-binary, neutrosis, gender fluid, demi-boy, demi-girl, demi-lardner.
That's Google history! He's a million years old!
Just to name a few. This is what happens when you confuse children. They start to make up their own problems in their own mind, and what compounds that is the fact that they have nothing else to really worry about in the world. For example, there's no one in Syria right now in the middle of a war zone worrying about, oh, in the morning I feel more like a female, and then in the afternoon more like a male. They just don't. And this leads to a whole nother topic, gender dysphoria and transgender people. And before I go on to that, can I just say, whatever you want to do in your life, whatever makes you feel happy, whatever makes you feel comfortable, if being a transgender person makes you feel happy, then by all means, please go ahead and do so. Whatever makes you happy, but as long as it doesn't affect other people. And this is what the argument is. Everything that I've talked about in this video affects others. Changing schooling systems, changing what you can and cannot say. It's affecting other people. And that's not fair. That's not a world where freedom of speech exists, and that's not okay. To give you an example of what it's like to bring your child up with no gender, this couple appeared on British television to explain their situation.
Louise was born a man, but is now having hormone treatment to transition to become a woman. Nikki was born a woman and dresses as both a man and a woman, depending how you're feeling, is that right, Nikki, on the day? And both of them wanted to raise their son as gender neutral so that he thinks of himself as a person rather than a boy.
This child, in its development years, its formative years, now believes whatever its parents have told him. It sounds a lot like something that if I talked about on Facebook, it would immediately get my video removed and get me banned. So instead I will show this photo that has been on your screen now for about 10 seconds. I think you get the point. You may think that, hey, I don't have any kids, this isn't going to affect me. Well, use Canada as a case study. It's currently against the law in Canada, against human rights in fact, to misgender someone, to use the incorrect gender pronouns. And by gender pronouns, of course, I mean not referring to someone by his or her or he or she and using words like sie, zim, sie, ze. You are legally required to call them that. Sie, zim, sie, ze. Made up words. Words that are not created organically. They are forced upon people. This is a slippery slope. This is what we're dealing with. At the moment in Australia, it's quite a small issue, but it will grow over time. The Canadian legislation famously gave us Jordan Peterson. A lot of people don't understand what actually happened in that situation. They think that he deliberately misgendered people, but in fact, he was happy to call people by whatever they wanted to be called by, but he didn't want to be told by the government what he could and could not say. Allowing the government to dictate what you must say and what you must do is a fundamental attack on free speech and should be avoided at all costs. And that's what may happen in Australia over time. Perhaps Victoria is the first step. It's opened this channel of conversation. Whether what is happening there is true or not, people are now discussing it. And what makes it so dangerous is people are afraid to talk about it. They worry they'll lose their jobs, they'll be shunned, and they'll be kicked out of the community because it's a taboo subject. But we should talk about it, and we should talk about it openly. Everything I say doesn't come from a place of hate. I'll accept absolutely anyone. If you're not a cunt to me, I won't be a cunt to you. If you want to encourage young women to be in fields they're not normally in, do what the UFC did. They encourage women to become fighters, and once they signed their first fighter in 2012, the sport exploded, and they didn't make these big differences between the men and the women. They are there because they deserve to be there. They are there on merit and merit alone, which should be a lesson for anyone trying to achieve anything in life. If you live your life as a victim, you will never achieve anything. This victimhood complex is very perplexing and detrimental to young people all across the world. The sooner we stop making it about teams and who's the worst and who's the best, and the sooner we get along with each other, perhaps to be a bit more layman, the sooner we stop carrying on like fuckwits and the sooner we just accept everyone for whatever they want to be and we don't try and change other people's lives to make you feel better, perhaps the better we'll be as a society. There's a lot of other fucked up things that are going on in the world, and perhaps this right now doesn't need our attention. Anyway, hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, leave it a like and subscribe. You know what to do. I've still got a handful of tickets left for my tour. Check it out. Bad for your health. It's going to be fucking amazing. Don't worry about that. Check me out on Instagram at @TheButtsman, check me out on Snapchat at @TheButtsman, and follow my pages wherever I happen to be. Anyway, peace in the Middle East, be a good motherfucker, and just don't be a cockhead. Toodaloo.